Warm greetings to all. Today we are going to see Revolt of 1857 or Sepoy Mutiny of 1857. In other words, the first war of Indian independence. The Revolt of 1857 was the conscious beginning of the independence struggle against the colonial tyranny of the British. There are various names for the revolt of 1857. India's first war of independence, Sepoy Mutiny, Great Rebellion of 1857, etc. The revolt began on May 10, 1857 at Meerut as a Sepoy Mutiny. It was initiated by Sepoys in the Bengal Presidency against the British officers. This war of independence marked the end of British rule in India. Very particularly, the British East India Company rule was ended by 1857 revolt. Post this 1857, India was directly ruled by the British government through representatives known as Governor General. So far, under the British East India Company, it was ruled by Governor Generals. So after the 1857 revolt, the Governor Generals were replaced by Viceroys. Viceroys were the representative of British Crown. So what was the background of the 1857 incident? From 1757 to 1857, the East India Company established strong colonial footings in India. But during this time, the East India Company was involved in the visible aspects of colonialism, and that exploitation greatly hammered the prospects of Indians in terms of social, political, economical, and military scenario of India. In all those fields, like social, political, economic, and military, Indians were exploited by the British. Thus, the exploitation carried out by the East India Company in 100 years found reactions in various revolts. But the scale of the revolt of 1857 was much larger and unprecedented. This revolt prompted the British Parliament to take direct control over India. Now we will see the causes for the revolt of 1857. The revolt of 1857 was initiated due to various factors which are stated below: social causes, economical causes, political causes, military causes, and immediate causes for the revolt. Let me explain one by one. First and foremost, social causes or social factors. Racial discrimination was the prime factor. Indians suffered badly in the hands of the Europeans. There was visible racial exploitation wherein Indians were not allowed to mix with the Europeans. There was discrimination that was also carried out in public places. The British were also circumspect about interfering in the religious and cultural affairs of Indians. At the beginning of the 19th century, the British began to support their bid of social reforms by the method of legislation. Indians began to doubt the objectives of the British since the advent of this legislation. Some glaring examples of this period are the 1813 Charter Act, which conservative Indians viewed as an imposition of Christianity over them. Therefore, they sharply reacted. At the same time, when some of the social legislations were passed, like the abolition of Sati, 1829 was passed by Lord William Penting, prohibition of child marriage, widow remarriage, etc., were all understood by Indians as a bid to impose Christianity over them. The fear of conversion was existed among the Indians. So apart from social causes, number of political causes also responsible for the 1857 revolt. The British expansion had led to the propagation of unjust policies that led to the loss of power of the Nawab and Zamindars residing at various places of India. The introduction of unfair policies like the policy of trade and commerce, the policy of indirect subordination, in other words, subsidiary alliances, the policy of war and annexation, the policy of direct subordination, which means doctrine of lapse, the policy of misgovernance, which means through which Awadh was annexed. These unfair policies greatly hampered the interest of the rulers of native states, and they one by one became victims of British expansion. Therefore, those rulers who lost their states to the British were naturally against the British and took sides against them during the revolt. Economic factors. Economic factors also played an important role in 1857 revolt. There were various reforms in the taxation and revenue system that affected the peasants heavily. British government had imposed and introduced various administrative policy to expand their territory. The major policies are listed below. Permanent settlement in Bengal by the Governor General Lord Cornwallis in the year 1793. Mahalwari system in central India introduced by Holt Mackenzie in the year 1822. Rayatwari system in southern India introduced by Thomas Munro in 1820 at Madras. These three settlements were highly exploitative, and in particular, the permanent settlement had created a devastating impact. Thus, the peasants were greatly encouraged to overthrow the British government from India and led to their active participation in the revolt of 1857. Military causes also played a pivotal role in the 1857 revolt. The Indian soldiers faced a lot of discrimination from the British officials with respect to their salaries, pensions, promotions. Indians were subjugated in the military while their European counterparts faced no such discrimination. During the time of Lord Canning, two important laws were passed. Both these acts were passed in 1857. I beg your pardon, 1856. General Service Enlistment Act. This act meant that if Indian military personnel were posted abroad, they would not be entitled to get extra allowances. Whereas, if a British or European posted in abroad, they enjoyed all the privileges. In due course, Indians would not be entitled to get extra allowances. And one more act was passed in the year 1857 by the time of Lord Canning was Religious Disabilities Act. For Indian soldiers, the belief was that if they crossed the ocean, they would lose their religion. They would thus be socially ostracized. Thus, Hindu soldiers skipped appointments that involved serving in a foreign land. But after the passing of the Religious Disabilities Act, they would have to take the appointment compulsorily. Otherwise, they would lose their job. At the same time, the use of religious symbol in the military were also restricted. So, after all, socio-economic, political, as well as military cause, the immediate cause also have a role to play. So, the immediate cause was introduction of Enfield rifle. The cartridge had to be bitten off before loading it into the gun. Indian Sepoys believed that the cartridge was greased with either pig fat or made from cow fat. This was against the Hindu and Muslim sentiments and religious ideologies. Thus, they were reluctant to use the Enfield rifle. This was a flashpoint to enrage the soldiers against the Britishers. This was believed to be the immediate factor for the revolt of 1857. So now we are going to see the course of the event. The revolt was first outbroke at Meerut. Then it shifted to Delhi. On 29th March 1857, a young soldier, namely Mangal Bande, was hanged to death for attacking his officers in Barakpur. Some days later, some Sipais of the regiment at Meerut refused to use the new cartridges. 85 Sipais were dismissed from the service and sentenced to 10 years in jails. This happened on 9th May 1857. First instance, Mangal Bande, who shot dead his chief while using the new Enfield. And, and on next, 9th May 1857, some Sipais of the regiment of Meerut refused to use the new cartridges. So this was the starting point. The response of the other Indian soldiers in Meerut was quite extraordinary. On 10th May, the soldiers marched to the jail in Meerut and released the imprisoned Sipais. They attacked and killed British officers. They captured guns and ammunition and set fire to the buildings and properties of the British and declared war on the Firangis. Firangis means foreigners. The soldiers were determined to bring an end to their rule in the country, but who would rule the land instead? The soldiers had answered to this question, the Mughal Emperor Bahadur Shah Safa. The Sipais of Meerut rode all night of 10 May to reach Delhi. They started from Meerut and reached Delhi on 10th May 1857 in the early hours of next morning. As the news of their arrival spread, the regiments stationed in Delhi also rose up in rebellion. The British also counterattacked. Again, British officers were killed, arms and ammunition seized, buildings set on fire. Triumphant soldiers gathered around the walls of the Red Fort. They forced their way into the palace and proclaimed Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader. The aging emperor, the Bahadur Shah Zafar, had to accept this demand. He wrote letters to all the chiefs and rulers of the country to come forward and organize a confederacy of Indian states to fight the British. This single step taken by Bahadur Shah had great implications. The British had not expected this to happen. They thought the disturbance caused by the issue of the cartridges would die down. But Bahadur Shah Zafar's decision to bless the rebellion changed the entire situation dramatically. After the British were routed from Delhi, there was no uprising for almost a week. It took that much time for news to travel. So it took 10 days to travel this news. Then a spurt of minutes began. Then a spurt of mutinies began. Regiment after regiment mutinied and took off to join other troops at nodal points like Delhi, Kanpur, and Lucknow. After them, the people of the towns and villages also rose up in the rebellion and rallied around local leaders, zamindars, and chiefs who were prepared to establish their authority and fight the British. So earlier, it was led by soldiers, but later, the villagers and the peoples from town like Delhi, Kanpur, and Lucknow, they were also joined with their leaders, with their jamindars, as well as the chiefs of their towns and villages. So, after this incident, the rebellion spread. Nana Sahib, the adopted son of the late Peshwa Bajirao, who lived near Kanpur, gathered armed forces and expelled the British garrison from the city. He proclaimed himself as Peshwa. In Lucknow, Burgess Ghadar, the son of the deposed Nawab Wajid Ali Shah, was proclaimed the new Nawab. In Jhansi, the famous Rani Lakshmi Bai joined the rebel Sipais and fought the British along with Dandiya Doab, the general of Nana Sahib. The British were greatly outnumbered by the rebel forces. They were defeated in a number of battles. So, British have severe blows. But because of the mighty military power, the British fight backs. Unnerved by the scale of the upheaval, the company decided to repress the revolt with all its might. It brought reinforcements from England, passed new laws so that the rebels could be convicted with ease, and then moved into storm centers of the revolt. So, after the fight back, Delhi was recaptured from the rebel forces in September 1857. The last Mughal emperor, Bahadur Shah Zafar, was tried in court and sentenced to life imprisonment. His sons were shot dead before his eyes. He and his wife, Begum Zinnat Mahal, were sent to prison in Rangoon in October 1858. Bahadur Shah Zafar died in the Rangoon jail in November 1862. So after the gap of 5 years. Lucknow was taken in March 1858. Rani Lakshmi was defeated and killed in June 1858. Dandiya Doab escaped to the jungles of the central India and continued to fight a guerrilla warfare with the support of many tribal and peasants leaders. He was finally captured, tried, and killed in April 1858. So, all the rebel leaders during 1857 revolt, they were brutally killed by the British. Hundreds of Sipais, rebels, Nawabs, and Rajas were tried and hanged. The British had regained control of the country by the end of 1859. So, almost it took 2 years to regain their previous status. Here, I would like to show some important list of leaders associated with the revolt of 1857. Delhi, whose important leader is Bahadur Shah II and General Bakht Khan. Lucknow, the revolt was led by Begum Hazrat Mahal, Burgess Kadir, and Ahmadullah. Kanpur, Nana Sahib, Rao Sahib, Dandiya Doab, and Azimullah Khan. Jhansi, which was led by Rani Lakshmi Bai. Bihar, which was led by Kunwar Singh and Amar Singh. Rajasthan, Jai Dayal Singh and Hardayal Singh. Farooqabad, which was led by Tufsal Hassan Khan. And Assam, which was led by Kanda Pareshwar Singh, Maniram Dutt, and Orissa by Surendra Sagi and Ujjwal Sagi. So these were the important places and important leaders who took part in the 1857 revolt. 1857 revolt made some important changes in the Indian political aspects. So take a look at the map of India where the places Meerut, Delhi, Kanpur, Awadh, Calcutta, Jhansi. So, I mean, the revolt spread and revolt happened in all these areas. Many of the common people, like the peasants and the artisans, were also joined in the revolt. So, why this was failed, sir? What are the causes for the failure of the revolt of 1857? The revolt was eventually not successful in ousting the British from the country because of the several factors. The Sepoys lacked one clear leader. There were several. They also did not have coherent plan by which the foreigners would be routed. Indian rulers who aided the revolt did not envision any plan for the country after the British were defeated. Majorly, northern India was affected by this revolt. The three presidencies of Bengal, Bombay, and Madras remained mostly unaffected. The Sikh soldiers also did not take part in the rebellion. Impact of the 1857 revolt. Revolt of 1857, also known as First War of Indian Independence, played a major role in the shifting of powers from East India Company to British Crown. Soon after the war, new laws were passed to abolish East India Company and they were merely reduced to a trading organization. After the 1857 revolt, India comes under direct control of British Crown. So 100 years of the rule of the East India Company marked the zenith of exploitation in India. And this exploitation was in all directions. For example, social, economic and political life of Indians. The intensity of the revolt of 1857, although confined in certain pockets, was so high that it shook the backbone of the British rule in India. And it also proved the fact that the East India Company, which was basically a trading organization, was not efficient enough in tackling Indian administration. The revolt exposed the hollowness of the company's rule in India. The British government could not, I beg your pardon, could not afford to lose India at any cost. So, therefore, the British government decided to abolish the rule of the East India Company and direct government was installed, guided by the British Parliament. So, the revolt have some immediate impact also, which was Government of India Act 1858. Under this Government of India Act, the rule of the East India Company was abolished and the British Parliament had taken direct responsibility towards ruling India. The East India Company returned to being just a trading organization. The role of the Governor General became more pronounced and his profile was now counted as the Viceroy as well. The difference between Governor General and Viceroy was that the Viceroy would act as the representative of the Queen and the Governor General was the representative of the British Parliament whose authority was restricted to that of British India itself and not on the princely state. The Board of Control established under the 1784 Pitt's India Act was abolished, which means the Board of Control was abolished. A new ministry was created known as India House, which was headed by Secretary of State for India, who was a minister for cabinet rank. There were 15 advisors to the India House who had wide experience of working in India. Thus, the British Parliament was trying to create a mechanism to avoid any further chances of revolt. The India House was the apex body to govern India, was a connecting link between the British Parliament and the Indian governing system. All ruling chiefs of the country were assured that their territory would never be annexed in future. They were allowed to pass on their kingdoms to their heirs, including adopted sons. However, they were made to acknowledge the British Queen as their sovereign paramount. Thus, the Indian rulers were to hold their kingdoms as a subordinate of the British crown. It was decided that the proportion of Indian soldiers in the army would be reduced and the number of European soldiers would be increased. It was also decided that instead of recruiting soldiers from Awadh, Bihar, Central India, and South India, more soldiers would be recruited from among the Gurkhas, Sikhs, and Pathans. They were the tribal peoples. The land and property of Muslims was confiscated on a large scale and they were treated with suspicion and hostility. The British believed that they were responsible for the rebellion in a big way. The British decided to respect the customary religious and social practices of the people in India. Policies were made to protect landlords and jamindars and give them security of rights over their lands. Thus, a new phase of history began after 1857. So, 1857 revolt made some tremendous changes in the Indian soil.